I'm Jim Carney.
I'm Linda Hirsch.
And this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
The conversation about education has largely been framed by politicians, business people, the media, and administrators. The missing voices are those of teachers, the people spending their days and careers in actual classrooms. Today, we will speak with a teacher, Janet Grossback-Mayer, the author of As Bad as They Say, 3 Decades of Teaching in the Bronx. The book recounts her student struggles and the many obstacles that stood in their way. But they are also stories of spirit, survival, and success. Along the way, she provides a portrait of the Bronx, its students, and the New York City school system that may surprise many.
Later on in the program, I'll catch up with one of those students who grew up in the Bronx who weathered the storm that is the New York City school system. And now to Linda and her guest in the studio.
My guest today is Janet Grossback-Mayer, the author of As Bad as They Say, 3 Decades of Teaching in the Bronx. She was born and raised in the Bronx and is the proud product of New York City Public Schools and Queens College. Janet Mayer began teaching in 1960 and retired in 2005, having taught more than 14,000 students. She has learned quite a bit about teaching, students, learning, what works and what doesn't. Welcome to EdCast.
Thank you for inviting me.
I had the pleasure of reading your book this week, and so many things I want to talk about. But I was most taken initially by your saying that you always knew you wanted to teach. How did you know that?
Well, I came home from the first day in kindergarten in the Bronx, and I told my mother that when I grew up, I was going to be a teacher. I must have had a wonderful day. And when I was in 8th grade, I won the English award, and I became an English teacher. It was a straight path. It was something I always knew I wanted to do. When I got into a classroom, I knew I was home, and I have been a teacher. I still teach part-time. This is my 51st year of teaching.
Wow. Do you think teaching is a calling? I mean, are some people meant to be teachers?
Well, I was. I
You
can't, say for other people. I've met lots of wonderful teachers who only decided after college or during the college years that it was something they would like to try, and found out that they did love it. So I don't think you have to be born as a teacher.
You gave your book a very provocative title, As Bad as They Say, and obviously it comes out of a perception that you feel people have of the Bronx and teaching in the Bronx. What was that perception that you found, and why did it make you title the book this way?
Well, in 1995, I was teaching in a high school in the Bronx, and the American Federation of Teachers, that's the union, the National Teachers Union, set up a pen pal program. And I received a wonderful letter from a professor in South Africa who wrote me that his students would love to meet my students in the Bronx, and he warned me that the letters may not be well written because apartheid was just ending, and his students and the whole South Africa area there had been under oppression and racial segregation for over 300 years, and the schools were just starting to be organized. So I did tell my students that the letters they're going to receive may not be well written, and we're not concerned about that. How wonderful to learn about another country, another culture. And the very first day that I gave out the letters from the South African students, there was a big buzz in my classroom. Everybody was excited. Everybody had a letter to read, including myself. And as we read the letters out loud, there was a question that appeared in almost every letter. And the question was, is the Bronx as bad as they say?
Wow.
And I was astonished, born and raised in the Bronx. I mean, I knew there were some talk, you go into Manhattan, about Bronx people, but to go as far as South Africa, my students were astonished. They could not believe South Africa, students who hadn't been in school long, had heard something about the Bronx that was negative.
I'm sure that made them feel really bad. I mean,
well, I
knowing
promised
that people
them.
think that, so bad
Of
you
course,
are.
we felt terrible.
Yeah.
So I promised that class, that was 1995, that when I retired, I would write a book about them and tell the world how wonderful Bronx teenagers are, how smart, how motivated, how tenacious, how capable of the highest achievements, and change the stereotype of the Bronx.
So let's
teenagers.
go right to some of those students. You describe a number of students who, in your words, defied expectations. So would you tell us about some of them? And
I wrote about 8. I could have written hundreds. after teaching 14,000 students. Omara is the first story. I changed her name to protect her privacy. She was a very quiet student, only was absent once, and when I asked her the next day when she returned to school if she was sick, she said her clothes hadn't dried. She only had 2 shirts. That was the most private thing she ever told me, and kept to herself the rest of the year until Christmas time, when she gave me a little Christmas card and kissed me goodbye and wished me happy holidays. And I thought, gee, that's a breakthrough, because she hadn't been that responsive. At the first day back, 11 days later, she came up to me at the end of the class and asked if she could talk to me after class. And I said, sure. I was going to lunch. We walked out into the hall, and she told me very matter-of-factly that her father had been killed during Christmas week, shot in the streets of the Bronx, on the street where they lived. And she was living with the father's girlfriend, and she couldn't stay there. The girlfriend could not afford to keep her. Could I recommend a good orphanage? I said, I don't know orphanages, but I know a wonderful guide. The tears were welling up in my eyes. I know a wonderful guidance counselor who I think could help, and I took her right down to the guidance counselor. Within a few hours, this wonderful guidance counselor was able to get the girlfriend to receive money for taking care of Omara. And that's how she lived for the next 4 years throughout her high school years. In 12th grade, she became pregnant, had a baby, complicated her life, but she did not drop out, which was my fear. She kept going to all her classes and did graduate with the baby in her arms at graduation. And just last week, haven't seen Omara for 16 years, she came to a book talk that I was doing, and she was standing there. I recognized her face right away, and that little baby was now 16 years old. And Omara owned her own daycare center. She has been a success, a wonderful success.
You mentioned, as you said, you profile 8 students. What are some of the obstacles and struggles that these students face?
Well, when I started teaching, I was 21, and I thought I was going to teach Shakespeare and Dickens and Keats, and then the kid had an asthma attack right in front of me and had no medication. And so I caught on very soon that you have to, cliche as it may be, you need to teach the whole child, that the kids were having not only home problems and school problems, but also street problems walking through the streets. And if you didn't deal with those problems, you couldn't teach a kid. You can't teach a hungry kid. You can't teach a sick kid. You need to deal with whatever it is this problem kid presents.
I think sometimes we forget that you have to teach to the whole child. Jim Carney had the opportunity to speak with your students, so let's take a look and see what they had to say.
Teresa is one of the success stories chronicled in As Bad as They Say. She not only survived the school system, but is now training to be a teacher herself, largely due to the inspiration of Janet Mayer.
I came from the Bronx, Pelham Bay section of the Bronx. I grew up there all my life. I went to PS 71 elementary school all the way through Lehman High School, graduated there in 1987. And I pretty much lived in the Bronx from East Pelham Bay to West Pelham Bay. Piagentini and Jones Middle School. It was a rough school, and I mean, I survived it. You know, we did what we had to do, and I went to Lehman High School, and at that point, Lehman High School was rated one of the best schools, and I was grateful for that. You know, I mean, high school student, you struggle for a little while, and you know, you meet friends, you meet teachers, you meet people you want to deal with, people you don't want to deal with, you know. And when I graduated there from Lehman, Herbert H. Lehman High School in '87, it was one of the worst schools. So I was kind of glad I was getting out of there.
How did it change in the time you were there?
Just not as friendly. You know, people more, I guess more gangs started to form. Teacher-wise, you didn't have the quality teachers you had. And I always managed to try to get the best one because I didn't want to be sitting in one with who didn't want to deal with students. And I mean, I've had some rough teachers, I've had some good teachers, you know, and I thank God for the ones who stuck out and really mentored me through things, Janet Mayer being one of them.
What kind of a teacher was Miss Mayer?
She was awesome.
When did you first meet Ms. Mayer?
I met her July 5th, 1983.
You remember the day exactly?
Yes, I did, because that was the most memorable day in the world. And she's helped me through a lot of things, in academic-wise, you know, personally-wise, and as time went on, I've had my days I was going to quit school, but I didn't because of her.
What did she do to
Just
change your mind about quitting school?
just the way that she said things, you know, she would just look at me, and she would do it within like a friendly tone, but very firm, and just saying, if that's what you want to do, then that's what you'll do. You know, I'm not gonna stop being your friend, but that's your choice. And she said, you don't want to be sitting, you know, you don't want to be sitting there doing nothing. You're not going to be able to do this. So she said, you know, make me proud. Go to school. Do this. Do that. And just the way she talked and inspired people on how she mentioned things and said, you know, you can become the wonderful teacher that you say that I am. And it got me thinking. And I did. And I stuck through it. And even when she left, I swore I was going with her to Dodge High School. I swore I was going there with her. I stuck with her as far as friends. I used to call her all the time. And then when I went to college, you know, the calls stopped, but I've always thought about her, always sent her cards. And when something exciting happened to me, I was like, Mrs. Mayer, look, you know, this. And so she was always there for me, even when we were not able to say hello or whatever. And even to this day now, you know. And I mean, she's been the most inspiration in my life throughout time, and inspired me to actually finish school to this point. I have 1 year left to do it, and to actually become a teacher. And I hope, if I succeed, that I'm becoming as good a teacher as she is, because she's a teacher, a friend, a mother. She's just the most wonderful mentor I've ever had.
So would you say that she was your inspiration to go into education yourself?
Yes, definitely, definitely. And when I first met her and I was talking, I said I wanted to be a teacher. She asked me why, and I said, because you get the summers off, you know. And she laughed. She said, "Is that all?" I said, "Yes." But then she helped me get my reading up. She helped me get my writing skills up throughout high school. So I said to her, "I know why I want to be a teacher." And she asked me why, and I said, because teachers like you make me want to help someone else. So in my lifetime, if I help one student, then I accomplished the goal that I needed to accomplish. And she's like, "That's right." And that still stands today, that, when the time does come and I am a teacher, if I help one student, then it's something that I accomplished. And she has helped me get to where I am today.
What is it that makes a good teacher?
What makes a good teacher? Someone who can strive through all the struggles that schools had. I had visited Grace Dodge High School, and it looks like a rundown building. But some teachers like Janet, who just not worry about what the building looks like, and they worry about what the building looks like because they care about the kids. Their main goal is to be there for the students, help them to get through, all the difficulties they're going through, whether it's home life or struggles in school, There has been a lot of changes with, teachers being laid off, which makes it much harder because classes get bigger, and it's, hard to deal with one-on-one. So at this point, the way I look at it today, students today are a number. It's not even a student. And to me, that's not how I was raised. That's not how I went to school, and it just got worse each time. Each time I go to a school, it's just, wow. So the schools change, but if the teacher just, if you're a real teacher, you'll be able to get through it. You just take one day at a time to get through the everyday life struggles.
These are obviously very compelling stories. Is there any other student profile that you'd want to speak about?
I have a student, Marion. I called her a rare gem in the book, and also a very quiet student, came from a Central American country English was her second language, so her reading scores were low because of English being her second language. Hardly spoke to any students, was engrossed in doing her work, and I had I guess it's a thing, I made birthday parties for a lot of my students who never had birthday parties. Maybe sometimes you'd have them in elementary school, but in high school it was unheard of. And a lot of my students took the day off when it was their birthday. So to encourage them to attend school, I would make a party. And early in the year, it was Marion's birthday, and she had no idea I made birthday parties. And I put a birthday card inside her folder. When she sat down, she opened her folder, she saw the birthday card. I got this great big smile. I love smiles. And from then on, we had a wonderful relationship. She went through 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. In 12th grade, she needed to pass the high stakes tests and the regents. And for children of immigrant children, these tests are very stressful. She was very stressed out. Many of her friends were stressed out from the ESL classes because graduation depended on these tests. And they have relatives coming from all over to attend what for many is the first graduation in the family. And I could see her falling apart. And one day I was in the halls and I saw a whole bunch of kids crying, approaching me. And I heard Marion's name. And I asked what had happened. I knew something had happened to Marion that was terrible. They could hardly get it out. And finally, one of the boys said that Marion had fallen from the 6th floor outside of her apartment to the concrete below, from the ledge to, and that she was in the
I
hospital.
know you say in the book that her family said that perhaps she was trying to catch a paper that had fallen out, or perhaps there were other thoughts that she just couldn't take the stress anymore. And
Right, it was June and it was a hot day, and she did study out on the lake.
yet she manages at the end of this chapter to continue with her life, yes?
That's why she's one of my heroes. All the kids I write about are my heroes, and most of the students I had are my heroes. She is a very...
It's amazing. You have a point in your book. You talk about multiple intelligences, and I think it's building on what you just said now about how the stress of these tests and what students have to, the high stakes testing. Why do you feel that the concept or the use of multiple intelligences is so important?
Well, we only test for reading and math. Like, those are the highest tests or the highest subjects in the land. Nobody ever designated them as God's gift to education. There's music and art and science
And these are the
history.
Howard Gardner.
Howard Gardner has, where he doesn't put them, they're all on the same level. The art, the music, the interpersonal relationship, intelligence, all of these are of very high significance. And some kids and some people excel at some and not others. Why just count reading and math as everything? And so I wrote about some students. The city schools have been cut by funding from 1975. There was very little music and art left. And I wrote about students who were so talented in areas that we weren't teaching in school, that were so neglected. And so I want to restore. It's important that these other intelligence, most of the other intelligences like music and art and dance,
All being cut.
well, they were all cut. But for the rest of your life after school, those are the ones that keep you going. Those are the ones that sustain
Now,
you.
of course, I mean, you wouldn't go so far as to say that it doesn't matter if these kids can learn how to read or not. I mean, I'm assuming that you still, when you graduate high school, in my own feeling, I mean, you should be able to read. I know we had Beth Furtick was on the program, and she'd written a book called Can You Teach Me to Read, about some students who had gone through the entire New York City school system without learning to read at all. So I don't know that it would be okay to graduate without ever knowing how to read, but I think you're not saying that. You're saying that
That shouldn't be the only emphasis.
thing.
Of course kids have to know how to read. And you have to have reading teachers. You can't just send in untrained teachers and expect kids to learn to read by an untrained teacher. You need a lot of training to teach reading, especially in the older kids in the high school level.
you call the concluding section of your book Losing Our Way, and your last chapter discusses what you call the demise and dismantling of public education. Why so grim?
51 years of being in the school system and seeing what's happening. I think if you ask me what the biggest problem was, I'll start at the top. It's the billionaire boys club, what Diane Ravitch calls the billionaire boys club, the Bill Gates, the Walton family, the Eli
Why are they a
Broad.
problem?
They are not educators. They are non-educators, like Mayor Bloomberg, controlling education, setting policy. If they just wanted to give money, that would be fine. But they control policy. They're non-educators. Even our Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, is not an educator. He was a professional basketball player and
So
made
what
superintendent.
I'm sorry to interrupt. What don't they know that they should know, that an educator would know?
They don't think anything that we learned before is valid. They're starting new. They don't look at any research. They don't look at any evidence. They don't think teachers need to know any training. They don't think principals need to know anything. Eli Broad runs a superintendent's school, training superintendents on weekends. Their CEOs, one was a transit CEO last year, they get weekend training, and then 36 of them are out in 36 cities. They're not in the suburbs, they're not in Great Neck and Scarsdale. These superintendents are, there's a feeling by these billionaire businessmen that you don't need to know anything about education in order to be good.
What do you feel about some of the changes that Mayor Bloomberg has made, the dismantling of some of the larger failing high schools into smaller schools and the new trend toward charter schools?
That had been tried before Mayor Bloomberg in the 1980s. It was a complete failure. There's lots of evidence out there. Arnie Duncan closed thousands of schools in Chicago when he was superintendent there. The evidence was it didn't work. It was
The evidence was that those students then went on into other schools that were equally poor performers.
Where are you going to put them?
We reported on that.
Right. Okay. And so we know the
So it didn't
evidence
help
is
them.
there that I worked in the I went back in 2003 as a mentor to the mini schools, the small schools, and I saw you have 5 principals in one building that used to have one, and they're all stepping on each other, and the kids are running all over the building, and it doesn't work. You can't have 5
You
principals.
also said something about the theme schools being sort of bogus. Yes, I mean, but
Yes, of course they're bogus. Technology schools and engineering schools and law schools, the teachers weren't trained in law or technology. It's just a name they gave to attract kids into the building, but there was nothing that was going to train them to do these jobs.
So we only have a minute left. What would you want us to take away from this book
I would like
and from your experience?
I would like people to join SOS, Save Our Schools. It's a large movement across the country, parents, teachers, administrators, trying to save our schools, to bring attention to the fact that there's evidence out there that charter schools aren't any better. In many cases, they're worse. Race to the Top only took 11 states. What happened to the 39 other states? No Child Left Behind. Every school in this country will fail if we went by No Child Left Behind in 2014. We need parents, teachers, educators, anybody concerned about education to help us save our public schools because they are being ruined by people who don't really know what they're doing.
Oh, there's nothing to add except to thank you so much and to say that you come through as a major influence on your students' lives, and I'm really hoping that other teachers out there, that we can all learn from what you've gone through. Thank you so very much for joining us today on EdCast.
You're very
Please
welcome.
don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites.
Why do average SAT scores continue to decline? Education Week reports that since 2007, reading and writing scores have dropped 4 points each. While some point to a larger, more diverse pool of test takers as an explanation, the College Board suggests that curriculum could be a key factor. Students taking less than 4 years of English in high school have shown a greater decline. Others point to overall negative effects programs such as No Child Left Behind have made, saying their emphasis on testing narrows the curriculum and diminishes the quality of education.
eSchool News reports that the lack of graduates in the STEM fields of science, technology, engineering, and math is the result of a lack of highly qualified teachers in these fields. James Simons, the board chair of Renaissance Technologies, says there is an obvious reason for the dearth of teachers in these areas. Being a teacher, he states, is not attractive. You get little pay and no respect. Simons claims that even those who might begin as STEM teachers soon leave for more lucrative and supportive jobs.
New research indicates that a child's math ability is evident in the pre-K years. According to Inside Schools research, 4-year-olds who are better than their peers at estimating and comparing a number of objects in a group may not be smarter or have better verbal skills, but they will be better at number estimating and formal math skills at age 6. Researchers suggest that it might make sense to screen for number estimation ability along with other pre-K tests to identify those students who might have difficulties later on and those who have mathematics potential.
The big buzz in academic circles right now concerns using student test scores to evaluate teachers, and the testing expert who says, don't. According to Howard Weiner, the former chief statistician for ETS and the author of Uneducated Guesses, test scores were not designed to assess the value of teachers. Weiner has little faith in the current much-touted value-added model. It is impossible, he says, to draw a causal inference from these scores. In other words, we cannot know that changes in a student's scores were caused by the teacher. The book contains many references to the misuse of statistics, all of which seems not to deter those nationwide advocating using these scores to judge teachers.
Well, that does it for this edition of EdCast.
Until next time, class dismissed.